All right, guys, just want to welcome back to the Everything College Football podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're looking at Damien Martinez, Oregon State running back, enters the transfer portal. He's going to be one of the top options available here in this spring cycle. Highly coveted back, who wasn't all that desirable coming out of high school, Nick. Only had a handful of offers, Texas State, San Diego State, Georgia Tech, Kansas. Those are the guys that offered him. Only a couple of them where he ends up settling on the Beavers. And he ends up having a phenomenal 2-year run with them. And now he enters, with plenty of experience under his back, plenty of production as well, nearly 2,200 yards, 15 touchdowns. It was a great fit for that offense. It was really built on a physical run game, slow it down with tempo, a lot of play action across the middle of the field. A fun scheme to watch under Jonathan Smith. Damien Martinez is a really good football player, Nick. This is a powerful player, a grown man type runner. Love his physicality. I think he's got some nice explosiveness in the open field as well. More of a change of pace back, though. And we're going to look at 6 different options here. But one you will not see is going to be Michigan State, Nick. I feel like if he was going to follow what was the entire staff leaving for Michigan State, he would have already done so. I think he did this deliberately to wait, see, what spots would be best available for him. If he was going to go back with his old coach, I thought he would have already did so. I don't think he's going to go to the Spartans. It won't even be on the table. Don't think he wants to be a part of a rebuild over there. And obviously there's a lot of loyalty. They could probably play a hand in that. But I think for the Spartans, it's not a desirable option right now for him. There's a lot better places that could be suitors for him, not in terms of just, production, but the ability to win. And, of course, NIL, Nick, that's going to be a big factor here as well. But Michigan State's not going to be on this list.
I share the same sentiment as you. I don't believe Michigan State is a contender to land Damien Martinez at this moment in time. They're going to be going through a deep rebuild up there in East Lansing. Obviously, he has loyalty to the coaching staff that recruited him at Oregon State, the coaching staff that he worked under and performed under, and became really this sort of star back for the Beavers. I don't think he's going to follow that staff though, and I don't blame him personally. You have a short window to play in college. You want to be able to use as much of that time as possible to competing at the highest level for conference titles and national championships, which we have a back here in Martinez that can do so. I love watching him play. I think the size is perfect at 6 foot, 232 pounds. I like the way he cuts, changes direction perfectly, really can hit the open holes and dominate down the field. This is a guy that's a big physical runner, has really good field vision, high football IQ, and now enters the portal late in the cycle as a guy that can be a really high upside player to plug into an offense across the country. It was a very shocking move for me. I figured if he was going to leave, it would have done it earlier. But he jumps in the portal here late. Like you said, you're probably suggesting that he wanted to see what other teams filled their rosters up, where spots would be available, and then threw his hat in the ring here. We're going to go through 6 schools that could all certainly be in a big opportunity to land this star talented player.
And looking at the first one, I think this would probably be one of the top options. I would assume would be Ole Miss, just because they just lost a player in Quinshad Judkins, who's the only back that's better than him. If you ask most people when it comes to transfer portal ratings at the position, 40 to 50 carries a game is what Ole Miss is looking to do. Lane Kiffin, always been a guy that loves to run the football. That's how they get this offense going. And that's when they start to move with tempo. And, Judkins, he had, 270 carries. He was a bit of a bell cow for them, but also got a good bit of a breather to allow some other guys to work. QB runs obviously heavily involved. They have a nice running back in Logan Diggs they picked up from LSU. And they pair him up with Martinez, who can get a solid bulk of the carries, not overwork himself, be productive. And, of course, Ole Miss is expected to compete in the SEC. They're one of the top favorites right now in that conference, and they should be going into the preseason. This seems like an optimal fit, Nick, again, because Ole Miss, they want a player just like Judkins. Of course, that departure was very interesting, but this is a similar type of player in terms of stature and skills. What are your thoughts on that?
I think this could make a lot of sense here, right? Ole Miss needs to replace a player in Judkins that they lost. Ole Miss fans were disappointed that Judkins left, kind of bolted off to Ohio State. And now you can bring in a like-for-like replacement, in my opinion. Judkins and Martinez are very similar with their style of play. They're both very experienced backs so far in college football. 2 guys that weren't recruited heavily out of high school, that went to programs that aren't extremely national powerhouses. Ole Miss obviously has had a lot of success under Kiffin, but they're not your Alabamas, your Georgias, things like that. And Oregon State certainly isn't either. And both these guys found their ways with dynamic offenses at smaller programs in the national footprint and have really turned into dominating backs. Judd moves on. Now you can kind of plug in Martinez here and step up and have a guy that's really solid physical runner that is not afraid to take a bunch of carries if necessary. I think this would make a lot of sense. He had 194 carries last year. That's the type of production they're looking to get at Ole Miss, type of production that Judkins had as well. If you plug him in there, I think this would be an instant success for Ole Miss, for a team that's got national title expectations at this point in time. Kiffin has built together an incredible team We know that he's not afraid to use the portal. He's an incredible master in the portal. He's been really adding a ton of talented players. This would just be another great ad for him.
Looking at another option that should be high up on the list, USC. You look at the Trojans, they really struggled to run the football last season, really just shied away from it for the most part. The offensive line was really poor. Obviously, you're playing from behind pretty much for the entire 60 minutes of how poor the defense was. And, that's certainly something that's going to be a turnoff for Martinez as a team that only ran the ball 28 times per game last year. But a similar style back in terms of, bigger, more powerful runners were successful for Riley at Oklahoma, in his early days as the head coach. You had guys like Kennedy Brooks. I think Trey Sermon was one of his backs as well. It was a physical runner, a little bit smaller, but that stature certainly has excelled for USC, and I think it's a nice selling point with the NIL. Obviously, it's not much of a move. The time zone's going to be the same, and only a quick trip down to LA from Corvallis compared to some of these other trips, Nick, across the country. So it'd be easy for him to get settled in. This team, they should be a contender, probably not as much as the other teams on this list, but NIL is going to be luxurious out there. They picked up Jaquavius Marks, of course, from Mississippi State. Martinez, another school where he wouldn't exactly have to be a bell cow, but he could be impactful and really develop his game, because that's one thing that they're able to do with Marshawn Lloyd, who has been skyrocketing up draft boards, and I think it's a nice selling point.
It certainly is a nice selling point, right? You have a great NIL package that could be offered at USC. Lincoln Riley is a fantastic offensive coach. This high-flying offense does need to get better on the ground. They do need to find a way to have more balance. They do not run the ball enough out there in Southern California. And you can plug in a guy like Martinez, who's going to give you consistent carries and will be able to look good on the ground. Martinez is a really strong physical runner that I think could be a lot better than Lloyd was in the system. You plug him in, give him a few more carries. You might have to tinker some of the playbook a little bit to add some more options for him. That would work a lot. Obviously, Martinez may not love the idea of, like you said, 28 carries per game. It's certainly a little bit below what he's expecting, but you can always change the offense on a fly a little bit, work on that in the offseason. The NIL package would be very massive out there. They could certainly pay him big bucks, and this guy wants to go out and get a nice payday while also playing for a team that will be competitive in the new look Big Ten. This could be a great move for him.
Downhill running isn't exactly USC's forte, but that's, probably because they didn't have the right personnel, I think is a good argument you could make. Looking at Tennessee, the Volunteers, Josh Heupel, he's done a phenomenal job at Tennessee, Nick. I think we both know that we didn't expect any of this in terms of success, especially early on, for them to be able to beat Alabama, turn around, lead them for an entire half on the road. I mean, this is a far cry from what Tennessee used to be as a program. I think that's why they're incredibly desirable. The Nico Lamaliva, who doesn't want to play with that guy? I absolutely love that, quarterback for the Volunteers. And, he's going to need some help, though. And this is a running back room last year that we talked about how they were going to be a three-headed monster. Jalen Wright, Jabari Small, Dylan Sampson. Sampson's the only one left. 604 yards, 7 touchdowns a season ago from him. A team that also loves to run the ball. 37 attempts per game as a team. Those three running backs all get 8 or more attempts per contest. So Martinez could also, keep the wheels fresh, but also be impactful and run straight downhill. They love to do that. They have a lot of very nice run concepts. The yards per carry number is phenomenal from these running backs. This would be really fun to watch, Nick. I think I'd love to see him be a Tennessee Volunteer. I love Dylan Sampson. I think he's going to be a really good player. And, this is exactly what Tennessee would want to do to try and replace those guys that do depart. And, I think the production would still be there for Martinez. He'd be highly impactful. Underrated school right here that I think will pursue his services.
Tennessee is transitioning a little bit here with Joe Milton moving on and Jalen Wright heading to the NFL draft, and you plug in Nico Lamaliva and Dylan Sampson there as the two players. Sampson, a good back. I like Sampson a lot. I think he's got a lot of potential, high upside player, but I think he needs a better partner. I think Cameron Seldon and Khalif Keefe are both, too inexperienced, don't have enough touches on them to be those reliable number two. If you plug Martinez in, you can kind of do that 1A, 1B setup down there on Rocky Top that I think will work out great. I think Sampson and Martinez here would have a great 1-2 punch. You can kind of swap them in and out, keep the legs fresh like you suggested, but also give them enough carries to keep them up to their full potential. This could work out great here. Tennessee also has a decent NIL war chest, so money shouldn't be a problem. Heupel, an offensive genius who has really turned Tennessee around and changed the fortunes on Rocky Top very quickly. This could be a guy that you add in and makes Tennessee, that just more competitive in the new look SEC. That's going to get a lot tougher. Tennessee have a tough schedule this year. Adding a second veteran back to help Sampson out could really help balance this offense out.
Looking at 3 more options for Damien Martinez. I'm going to go ahead and jump right to the bottom of the screen, one that kind of, was a bit shocking, and that's SMU. The biggest selling point here is, Martinez is from that Dallas-Fort Worth area. SMU can technically compete for the college football playoff now, joining the ACC. Obviously, win your conference, you're in the playoffs. And even if you don't win the conference, you still have an opportunity to do so. And SMU was a really good team a season ago. Rhett Lashley, his offense especially is no joke. I know their defense was really outstanding last year, but this offense has always been high flying. A lot of people love Rhett Lashley. A lot of people, Miami fandom aren't exactly happy that he escaped Coral Gables. But this is a good coach in terms of offense, Nick, and I think that he's certainly going to get everything he wants. I'm not really sure how much they can offer in terms of NIL. I think they would try to scrape up as much as they can to offer to him. This is a team that had plenty of different guys run the football. 3 different 400-yard rushers a season ago. This is a very deep backfield. They run the ball about 40 times a game. I think this is a guy who would meet the requirements in terms of, getting touches. And I think he'd be able to produce for them. In terms of money, though, in terms of, flashy name, it's not all there. Can they compete technically? Yes. Is it unlikely that they, can punch their ticket to the playoffs? Yes. But again, it's always something worth mentioning, Nick, when a player can return home, and that's exactly what you can do here with SMU. And I know Austin's not that far away. Texas, though, they're not on the list because their backfield is too incredibly deep. I don't think they're going to be in the sweepstakes one bit. So I put the Mustangs on this list as a bit of a wild card candidate.
I actually love this wildcard candidate. I saw SMU play in the Fenway Bowl. I watched this offense. I think Rhett Lashley, I spoke to him. I think he's a fantastic coach who is a great offensive mind, who is always looking to improve his team. They move into the ACC. They're in a great position, in my opinion. They actually do have a substantial NIL war chest that they're putting together down there. They could really start to develop and build bigger packages now that they've joined a bigger conference in the ACC. This is a team that can be competitive from day one in the new conference. I love the defense. I love the offense. I think they have a good running back room. I think, Jalen Knighton is a really solid back, a good veteran. You plug in Damien Martinez. This is a guy that would be really solid in this setup. Playing in your hometown area, close to home. A lot of players like to do that. That's sort of something that players kind of gravitate towards, to like to be able to play in their own backyard, play for a school they grew up watching. I don't know exactly if Martinez, was a fan of SMU or admired the team when he was in high school, but that's an angle that could certainly work out well. This SMU team, they can compete. They're no joke on offense. They have a really solid offense top to bottom. The defense, if it plays at the same level of intensity, this team could be a serious contender in the ACC in year one. This could be a fun project for Martinez to join and take that team to the next level.
You look at the top of the list, a team that's, as far as it comes in terms of mileage, Nick, traveling from Corvallis down to South Florida to play for Mario Cristobal in Miami, it's a big commitment. You really want that high-end difference maker, though, for the Hurricanes. I think they have a nice running back room, A.J. Allen, Mark Fletcher, some really good players. This is a team, though, again, they really want that high-end running back. It's always nice to have a nice rotation of 2 or 3 guys you're comfortable with, but what's also better is having a legit elite player, kind of like they had at Oregon. It seemed like they had guys that were, 1,200-yard rushers on a yearly basis. And I think that's exactly what Miami really needs here to try and get back to what, Cristobal wants to do, and that's to be able to have this physical, crushing ground game. It's kind of been an issue for them, kind of disappointing over the last 2 years how they haven't been exactly where they want to be. Henry Parrish, of course, he just entered the portal a couple weeks ago. 173 yards per game as a team. They're improving, right? And I think they can certainly continue to do so with that added physicality that they have. They can really grind down opponents if they can pull in Martinez, because the guys I just mentioned they have in Allen and Fletcher, they're already pretty physical. But Martinez would really complement what Cristobal wants to do here, and I think it'd be big in trying to, elevate this offense for Shannon Dawson. Already added Cam Ward, already has some nice receivers. This would give them a nice trio, Nick, in terms of Ward, Restrepo, and of course Martinez being the bell cow back for them. Does this one make sense for you? Because I think it does from a schematical standpoint. I think you'll be able to get enough money to come over here as well. That shouldn't be an issue one bit. But again, this is a long ways to travel, and familiarity is something that's going to be out the window.
Cam Ward came from the Pacific Northwest, so potentially you could see Damien Martinez come from that same area after playing there for a couple of seasons. Ward at Washington State, Martinez at Oregon State. This does make sense to me. This is an offense that is looking to get to that next level. The offense, blew hot and cold last year, had some issues for Mario Cristobal and company, but they returned Xavier Restrepo, who's such a talented player. They plug in Cam Ward, who is a really dynamic quarterback, and now you can add it back. I think Mark Fletcher is a great back, but he's young, a little inexperienced. That outside that in the running back room, Chris Johnson, A.J. Allen, these are guys that are solid backs, but you kind of want to add that extra piece. I think if you're looking at this, it's a very dominant offensive line that will create those running lanes for him, create those big holes. They're big physical people movers on that offensive line. They'll be able to create huge holes for him to work with. Martinez has great field vision to find and make those cuts. This would be a natural fit for me. Miami, they're a team that, I'm a little more bullish on. I'm cautiously optimistic about they're able to contend in the ACC this year. But you plug Martinez in, that shoots them up immediately on my list. They could certainly find their way competing for an ACC title.
And then looking at the final option here, the one that really would make the most sense terms of scheme fit. The Michigan Wolverines, the defending national champions. If you've watched them over the last 2 years, smash mouth football is just their MO. I think they ran the ball 40 straight times against Penn State, something like that, in that second half. That's what they do, Nick. They grind down opponents. I think that one of the drives against the Nittany Lions went 40 yards, but they took off 8 or 9 minutes. I mean, these guys have been really excelling to a T and bringing back smash mouth football. This is obviously a team that's going to be a contender. I know right now they're underdogs at home to Texas. They lose a lot. Sharon Moore's the head coach now. Doesn't matter, Nick. The respect is still going to be there from opponents until further notice. And I think the ability to, be a tango partner of Donovan Edwards, who is back, who's going to be the full-time runner now. I'm not convinced Michigan wants just him being the guy that's running, Blake Corum type of, carries, because, his frame certainly isn't as thick. But I think Martinez is a physical runner. This would be great for him. It's not much of a change because that's exactly what Oregon State did, right? Run it right at you. Of course, they had the best right tackle in college football. Michigan had the best offensive line in CFB, and that shouldn't change too much this upcoming season. Great scheme fit here, Nick. Obviously, Michigan people are expecting them to just kind of fall off a cliff, but if they get a player like this, I think that the eyebrows will be raised a little bit more.
The scheme fit is fantastic here. I think this is a running back room that they want to be able to use multiple backs. I know they have a new head coach, obviously, right? Jim Harbaugh moves on now. Sharon Moore takes over, but this is still his offense. He likes to have that 2-back option there, like they had with Edwards and Corum. Now Corum moves on. You have Edwards, but then you have Benjamin Hall and Kalen Mullings. You got to find someone else, in my opinion, that can step up there. I think those 2 backs are okay, but I think you want to have that veteran experience. Always helps. If you're going to have Edwards and Martinez here as a 1-2 punch, they kind of counteract or balance each other and add a new dynamic to this offense. This offense is still weak in the pass catcher department, so you want to have as much success on the ground if possible if you're Michigan here. Bringing a guy like Martinez will certainly add that extra level, especially with the question marks at quarterback at Michigan. We talked about that in a previous episode where there are a lot of question marks there. Adding a proven runner who's going to get you, 9, 10 touchdowns and 1,000 yards on the ground is something that Michigan's just certainly definitely looking to do.
Yeah, Khalil Mullings, not a player who's going to get a lot of touches on the ground anyways. Benjamin Hall only had 15 carries in 3 games last year. So I think they'd be incredibly ecstatic to get that. You can make a prediction if you want, Nick. I'm going to hold off for a couple of days before this portal actually opens. We hear some more traction. But I'd be shocked if it's not one of these 6 teams on the list. I think SMU, again, is going to be a nice little wild card. But I think Martinez will end up at, a perennial contender here, one that can offer him a nice package and a nice, game plan as well in terms of schematics. Damien Martinez, a great back. Not shocked that he entered the portal. I'm very interested, and I'm kind of glad that he waited, though. It makes this spring a little bit more exciting, and I think it allows him to make the right decision for him and, his future career.
It's super interesting to, this late in the cycle for a guy to enter the portal of this sort of magnitude and speed. I like Ole Miss here. I think Ole Miss is going to be the team that gets a nod. I think this is a team that has a ton of potential there. Obviously, Kiffin's a portal master. He's been making a ton of good progress in that regard. This is a team that can compete for a national title. Getting a back to replace Judkins solves that one question mark they have about Ole Miss is will they be able to run the ball at the same sort of velocity and speed and efficiency that they have been over the past couple of seasons. I think it works out too well for him in Oxford. I like to see Martinez go to Ole Miss at this point in the cycle.
Yep, I agree with you on that one 100%. I think they're the favorite, and I definitely think it'd be the most exciting fit. Be it for today's episode. As always, Nick, I appreciate you joining me. Portal opening up in a couple of days. A lot of excitement is certainly to be had. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.
And college football free agency. Oh, Blue Jays scored again. I love when that happens.